Hi, hello. Welcome to i-Tutor NCERT series. Today, we are going to discuss Class 11 Geography NCERT, Fundamentals of Physical Geography, Chapter 7, Composition and Structure of Atmosphere. So, in this chapter, we are going to discuss the atmosphere. Discuss about the atmosphere. So, that is the composition of atmosphere, gases in the atmosphere, water vapor, then structure of atmosphere, etc. Now, let's start. Air is essential to the survival of all organisms. So we know air is an essential thing for the survival of all organisms. Some organisms like humans may survive for some time without food and water, but can't survive even a few minutes without breathing air. So we know we need food and we need air for survival. Because it's help for the breathing, and the oxygen, especially the oxygen, helps for breathing. That shows the reason why we should understand the atmosphere in great detail. Atmosphere is a mixture of different gases, and it envelops on the earth all around. So what is atmosphere? It's a mixture of different gases, and it envelops the earth all around. It contains life-giving gases like oxygen for humans and animals, and the carbon dioxide for plants. So it contains oxygen for humans and carbon dioxide for plants. Now we know atmosphere, most of the atmosphere contains nitrogen. Nitrogen, it's 78% is nitrogen. Then oxygen, that is 22%. That is oxygen. The air is an integral part of the Earth's mass, and 99% of the total mass of atmosphere is confined to the height of 32 km from the Earth's surface. The air is colorless and odorless and can be felt only when it blows as wind. So the air is a colorless and odorless thing, and it can only be felt when it blows as wind. Now, composition of the atmosphere. The atmosphere is composed of gases, water vapor, and dust particles. The proportion of gases changes in the higher layers of the atmosphere in such a way that oxygen will be almost in negligible quantity at the height of 120 km. Similarly, carbon dioxide and water vapor are found only up to 90 km from the surface of Earth. Now, gases. Carbon dioxide is meteorologically a very important gas, as it is transparent to incoming solar radius but opaque to the outgoing terrestrial radiation. So the importance of carbon dioxide, it is very important because it is transparent to the incoming solar radiation. So it allows the incoming solar radiation to pass through it, but opaque to the outgoing terrestrial radiation. But it is opaque to the outgoing terrestrial radiation. It does not allow the outgoing terrestrial radiation to pass. It absorbs a part of terrestrial radiation and reflects back some part of it towards the Earth's surface. It is largely responsible for the greenhouse effect. So carbon dioxide is largely responsible for the greenhouse effect. The volume of other gases is constant, but the volume of carbon dioxide has been rising in the past few decades, mainly because of the burning of fossil fuels. So the amount of or the volume of carbon dioxide is rising in the few past decades. Why? Because we are using a lot of fossil fuels. So the burning of fossil fuel increase the volume of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. This has also increased the temperature of the air. So if the amount of carbon dioxide increase, it will also increase the temperature of the atmosphere. Ozone is another important component of the atmosphere, found between 10 to 50 km above the Earth's surface, and acts as a filter and absorbs the ultraviolet rays radiating from the sun and prevents them from reaching the surface of Earth. So next one is ozone. It's an important component of the atmosphere, and it's found between 10 to 50 km above the Earth's surface, and it acts as a filter and absorb the ultraviolet rays radiating from the sun and prevents them from reaching the surface of Earth. Now, water vapor. Water vapor is also a variable gas in the atmosphere. So it's a variable gas in the atmosphere. It decreases with altitude. So it decreases with altitude. So the amount of water vapor decreases with the increasing altitude. Okay. In the warm and wet tropics, it may account for 4% of the air by volume, while in the dry and cold areas of desert and polar regions, it may be less than 1% of the air. Okay, so in warm and wet tropics, it may account for 4% of the air by volume, but at the same time, the dry and cold areas of desert and polar regions, it may be less than 1%. Water vapor also decreases from the equator towards the poles. Okay, so the water vapor decreases from equator towards the poles. It also absorbs part of the insolation from the sun and preserves the earth's radiated heat. Okay, so the water vapor absorbs the part of insolation. Insolation means incoming solar radiations from the sun and preserve the earth's radiated heat. It thus acts like a blanket, allowing the earth neither to become too cold nor too hot. Okay, so the water vapor helps the earth neither to become too cold or not too hot. Water vapor also contributes to the stability and instability in the air. Now, dust particles. Atmosphere has a sufficient capacity to keep small solid particles which may originate from different sources and include sea salt, fine soils, smoke soot, ash, pollen, dust and disintegrated particles of meteors. Dust particles are generally concentrated in the lower layers of the atmosphere. Okay, so they are generally concentrated in the lower layers of atmosphere. Yet, conventional air currents may transport them to great heights. Okay, the conventional air currents, okay, they may transport this dust particle into great heights. The higher concentration of dust particle is found in subtropical and temperate region. Okay, so the higher concentration of dust particles are mainly found in the subtropical and temperate regions due to dry winds in comparison to equatorial and polar regions. Dust and salt particles act as hygroscopic nuclei around which water vapor condenses to produce clouds. Okay, so the dust and salt particles act as a hygroscopic nuclei around which water vapor condenses to produce clouds. Now, the structure of atmosphere. The atmosphere consists of different layers with varying density and temperature. Density is highest near the surface of the earth and decreases with increasing altitude. Okay, so if this is the surface of earth, then high density is here, high density, and here is the low density. Okay, these are some of the layers of atmosphere. So the density is high at near to the surface and low at the top. The column of atmosphere is divided into 5 different layers depending upon the temperature condition. They are troposphere, stratosphere, mesosphere, thermosphere and exosphere. Okay, so there is 5 layers. First one troposphere, then stratosphere, mesosphere, thermosphere and exosphere. Now, first one is troposphere. The troposphere is the lowermost layer of the atmosphere. Its average height is 13 km and extends roughly to a height of 8 km near the poles and about 18 km at the equator. Thickness of the troposphere is greater at the equator. Okay, so the thickness is greatest at the equator because heat is transported to great heights by strong conventional currents. This layer contains dust particles and water vapor. All changes in the climate and weather take place in this layer. Okay, so all the changes of climate and weather that take place in this layer, that is the troposphere. Temperature in this layer decreases at the rate of 1 degree Celsius for every 165 meter of height. Okay, so every 165 meter, what happened? The temperature decreases by the rate of 1 degree Celsius. Look at this picture. This is temperature. Okay, this is temperature and this is height. Now, look, now 20 degrees Celsius, but what happened? The height increases and the temperature is decreasing. Okay, temperature decreases in troposphere. Okay, so what happened? In troposphere, the temperature decreases with increasing height. That is in the rate of 1 degree Celsius. This is the most important layer for all biological activity. The zone separating the troposphere from the stratosphere is known as the tropopause. Okay, so this layer, okay, this is called a tropopause. That is, this layer, okay, the tropopause that separate troposphere and stratosphere. Okay, so this separating layer is called a tropopause. The air temperature at the tropopause is about minus 800 degrees Celsius over the equator and about minus 45 degrees Celsius over the poles. Now, the temperature here is nearly constant and hence it is called tropopause. Now, second one is the stratosphere. Stratosphere is found above the tropopause and extends up to a height of 50 km. Okay, the second layer is stratosphere and it extends up to a height of 50 km. One important feature of the stratosphere is that it contains the ozone layer. So the stratosphere contains ozone layer. Okay, in this layer, in this zone, we can see the ozone. Okay, so here is the ozone layer. Now, this layer absorbs ultraviolet radiation and shield life on the earth from intense harmful form of energy. Now, third one is the mesosphere. Mesosphere lies above the stratosphere. Okay, so third one is mesosphere. Look at this area or this region. This is mesosphere. Lies above the stratosphere and which extends up to a height of 80 km. In this layer, once again temperature starts decreasing with increasing the altitude and it reaches up to minus 100 degrees Celsius at the height of 80 km. Okay, so at the height of 80 km, it reaches to minus 100 degree. Okay, look at this. Okay, increasing height, what happened? The temperature is decreasing. Okay, and finally it reaches to minus 80 degree. Okay, sorry, minus 100 degree at 80 km. Okay, so that is mesosphere. The upper limit of mesosphere is known as mesopause. Okay, so this layer, the upper limit of mesosphere, that is called a mesopause, and it separates mesosphere from thermosphere. Now, the ionosphere is located between 80 and 400 km above the mesopause. Okay, so next one is ionosphere, that is above the mesosphere. Okay, the ionosphere is also known as thermosphere. Okay, ionosphere is known as thermosphere. Okay, this area, okay, this is called ionosphere or thermosphere. Now, radio waves transmitted from the earth are reflected back to the earth by this layer. Okay, so the radio waves that transmitted from the earth are reflected back to the earth by this layer. Okay, that is in the ionosphere. And sorry, there is one point also. It contains electrically charged particles known as ions and hence it is known as ionosphere. Okay, so the ionosphere contains electrically charged particles and that is why it is known as ionosphere. Okay, now temperature here starts increasing with height. Okay, so in this layer what happened? Temperature increasing with the increasing height. The uppermost layer of atmosphere above the thermosphere is known as exosphere. So the last layer, that is the uppermost layer, that is known as exosphere. This is the highest layer, but very little is known about it. Okay, so we don't know much about the layer. Whatever contents are there are extremely rarefied in this layer and it gradually merge with the outer space. So this layer merge with the outer space. Okay, so that is the final layer or the toppermost layer, uppermost layer, that is exosphere. Okay, so there is 5 layers. First one, troposphere, then stratosphere, next one, mesosphere, thermosphere, and finally exosphere. Okay, the thermosphere is known as ionosphere. It's also known as ionosphere. Sorry. Now, so it's known as ionosphere. Elements of weather and climate. So this is simple one. The main element of the atmosphere which are subject to change and which influence human life on the earth are temperature, pressure, winds, humidity, clouds and precipitation. Okay, so these are the main components or these are some of the main things which influence the changes of the atmosphere. Okay, so these can affect or these can influence the weather and climate of the atmosphere. We know what is the weather, what is weather and climate. Weather is the day-to-day atmospheric condition. Okay, but climate is the long-term weather condition. Okay, so that's about this chapter. If you have any doubts, you can comment below. For more videos, do like, share, subscribe.